Well, hey everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am here with the one, the only Anthony Alvino. What's up,
How's it
Anthony?
going, everybody?
Good to see you, buddy. Hey,
Good
so
to see
we
you. You doing
are,
all right?
yeah, doing all right. We are hanging out on is today Tuesday? Is that today? I think
I think
I
so.
think today's Tuesday. On a Tuesday afternoon, chatting about personal finances and kind of finances in general. Anthony actually does accounting, finance, HR for us as an organization, and has been kind of knee deep in this stuff. This is how his head works, and he's been obviously thinking about this for us as a church, but really also just at an individual level. We've been trying to think about ways to care and serve you. We really want to offer helpful content for you or for somebody you know. And so we're going to talk about some really practical ways in this time of uncertainty to kind of mitigate risk and to be able to think through how we manage our personal finances. And this is something that even for somebody like if you're not a Christian, church is not your deal at all, I hope this is helpful just in general. And so if you're watching this, couple things. One, would love for you to say hello so we can say hello back to you. You can just chat right there on the comments bar. We'll say hello to you. And then in addition to that, if you would just be thinking about either practical questions that you have or things that you're going to maybe bring up later, anytime that you, put a comment in the little sidebar just like this is great and so important. Thanks so much, Gary. Good to see you. Glad you're here. So please let us know you're checking it out, and we want to make this available. And then if you think that you have friends that would want to watch this, just click share, and you can either share it directly to them or share it to your Facebook timeline, and they'll be able to check it out. Hello, Alberta. Good to see you.
Alberta, how are you?
Glad you're here. Kendall Hummus is here too. Look at that. What's up, Kendall? Good to see you. So thanks everybody for joining us. So Anthony, obviously we're in kind of a unique situation, like on every level, right? Like if we just think about what we're all facing, this is completely unprecedented. And as we think about that, I would love for you to be able to share kind of personal tips as you think about an individual. Maybe they still have a job, but it's less money than they thought they were making. Maybe they still have a job, but they're not sure they're going to have a job in a couple. Kyra. I'm so sorry, Kyra. Did I say that right? I think I maybe did. Good to see you, Carol.
So that one good.
I got Carol. I know that one. But anyway, Anthony, just give folks a little bit maybe of a quick download on some things to be thinking about as it relates to kind of that situation right now in their personal finances.
Yeah. So the way that I think about it really, right, is just kind of this take a breath moment. Like we are all in this kind of weird new normal that there's no script for this, right? And so we're all trying to figure this out together. And I think that is fine. I think just admitting that, like, hey, I don't know what to do here. Same, right? None of us do. And we're going to kind of figure this out together. But let's just all kind of take a breath with some of these things that are out there for us to kind of use to take advantage of, and to kind of let us like hold the tide back just a little bit, right? In what feels like this crazy moment. And so that take a breath moment for me has been huge, just personally, certainly organizationally, and just kind of, I think, culturally would be a good thing for us right now. So like the four big things, right, that I think about when I think about like personal finances, right? And this is straight from Dave Ramsey, kind of his four kind of walls. He talks about food, utilities, shelter, and transportation, right? In that order. Those are the four things that we need. And if you kind of the four walls of those kind of budget items or whatever you want to think about it, if those four walls are up, then everything else kind of is, you can kind of like survive. And so we think about the first thing, like food, right? Like, I don't know about you, Phil, but I was at the grocery store this Saturday, first time that I had gone, and was able to get everything off my list, right? We had kind of had a running list going, and every time I would come back and like, I can't get that today, I'll get it next time I go. Grocery stores are starting to get food back, getting supplies back, feeling pretty good about that. When we think about utilities, most utilities have suspended their disconnects until further notice. And so think about like Aurora Water, ECCV for the folks that kind of live in our neck of the woods, Xcel Energy, IREA. all of those 4 specific vendors, but even probably more broad than that, they've discontinued or suspended their disconnect notices for the time being, right? And so that kind of gives you a reprieve. Like, man, you can't make the water bill. Your water's not going to get shut off. You're still going to have running water for your family and that sort of thing. If we think about kind of the home piece of it, home loans, your lenders have probably either reached out to you or you can reach out to them to get a deferment on your payment. Maybe that is a deferment altogether for a month or 2 months or 3 months, whatever you kind of need to kind of get back on your feet. And then evictions, kind of those notices have slowed down a little bit. I know law enforcement has kind of decided to kind of pause a little bit on that as well, just to give people a reprieve. And then the last piece, right? Transportation. So same thing with car loans, like deferment on leases and loans and payments and that sort of thing. Again, just to say, all right, we are all in this together, right? We don't know what the future is going to hold here, but we're all going to kind of survive and get those basics taken care of. And if that means needing to kind of get a deferral or whatever else, those things are definitely in place. And if you haven't reached out and need to reach out to those vendors and say, hey, I need some help here. And they're going to be more than willing, I think, to work with you. Because here's the thing, they're in the same situation with themselves, with their own vendors, and they're in the same situation themselves as human beings living on this planet. So for sure. And I think Kendall brought up the fact that, insurance companies as well, same thing. Yeah. Reach out to them. They're wanting to help.
Yeah, that's super helpful, man. And I think I'm just trying to kind of put in there some of the things that you're talking about, just so you guys know, if you're watching this afterwards, in the description of this video, I will link show notes that break all this down on a single document. But those are obviously super important. And I think a lot of us, it feels maybe to you like, oh gosh, I do need some of those things, but like, I don't want to admit that I need them, or it feels like I'm not doing my duty if I'm not making all those payments. And I think, to Anthony's point, like the companies themselves are in the same position. And so the worst that somebody can do to you is say no. I think we're at a time where we really need to be taking advantage of the opportunities that are available to us to be able to get some of this relief.
And knowing, right, that this is like a no for now, not forever sort of situation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You're not asking them to completely get rid of your mortgage, right? You're asking for a month or two, right? And what's going to happen practically, right, with that is it's going to get lumped onto the back end of the loan. So you're still going to be paying the same amount of money. The lender is still going to be getting all of the interest that they're owed, all of that stuff. But we're all just kind of taking a breath, taking a moment to kind of get through this all together.
For the car that you drive, Anthony, are you going to be able to defer payments on it, or?
Yeah, right. I stopped driving it, so I don't have to put more money into it, right?
That's good. What year is your Corolla?
It's a vintage 2005.
Vintage, dude. That's amazing, dude. I love that car. That's great. That's amazing.
Gets me where I need to go.
A couple other things, obviously, from an individual perspective, taxes. There are people that are starting to think about that. What is that both related to state here in Colorado as well as federal? What adjustments are folks thinking about?
So if we think about kind of now like a broader federal or state or federal level, right? So there's two things that are going on there. The first is the tax deadline has been extended from April 15th to July 15th. And so if you owe money this year, you've got 3 months to kind of get your taxes submitted, filed, and get all of that paid. So that's a bit of a reprieve there. If you are expecting money back, go get your taxes filed now so you can get some cash in your bank and get that taken care of now. And then just, this is a side note, and let me just kind of preface all of this. We are not tax professionals. We are not lawyers. I'm not smart enough to be any of those things. And so please connect with your tax advisor or anybody else that can help you with that. But if you're getting a huge refund, why don't you change your withholding so you can kind of get all of that throughout the year and not give the government a free loan. That's just free advice for you from me to you. And so that's from a tax perspective. So if we're like, if you're owing money, there's a pause on that. And then the bigger thing is this CARES Act. You all might have heard about it. It passed the Senate on last Wednesday, 96-0, by the way. Like, when's the last time that has ever happened? Then it passed the House on Friday and was signed by the president on Friday. And so it is law now. And so it is 880 pages of statute that have been absolutely mind-numbingly important for me to read through. And
Have you read all 880 of those pages, Anthony?
I've not, but I've been on so many webinars and
That's
calls.
true.
Like I feel like honestly, like I've got like a master's program in this CARES Act. So I've done a little bit of the heavy lifting, hoping to kind of pass some information on to you as it relates to that, and certainly stand on the shoulders of a lot of other people that have given me some good information. So we can dive into that for sure. Did Stephanie have a
Yeah, let me ask you, let me bring up that one. Stephanie said, our family took a decent pay cut and it was really hard to see that new check come in. They gave us a whopping $50 in hazard pay, which is super laughable compared to a huge chunk in pay we lost. Basics are all we're doing: food, shelter, gas, and utilities. It will be okay, but it is unsettling. Hoping for our tax returns so we can ride off that for a bit.
For sure. And that, Stephanie, you're not alone, right? Like you are one of so many of us, right, that are in that same spot. And so like no shame in that at all. Like, man, I get it. And that's why some of these programs, certainly within the CARES Act, have been created, right? And so we can share some of those things right now. The biggest thing that's going to help somebody like Stephanie and other people as well is cash for most people. So this is $1,200 for an adult making less than $75,000 a year. If you're married, that would be $2,400 for your household, assuming those same kind of income levels apply. It kind of graduates up the more you make, but there's still some cash for you to get. And then if you have kids, $500 credit for your kids. And so that is something that is cash that we are going to be receiving. The Secretary of the Treasury has said as soon as possible. He's hoping, I think he said in the next 3 weeks. That feels a little aggressive. But we think about the stimulus plan in 2008, that took 3 months for all of us to kind of matriculate through the system. I would think it's going to be sooner than 3 months because a lot of us have like direct deposits set up with taxes and that sort of thing. So the government can get us those checks, quote unquote. They're not going to be physical checks anymore, those dollars sooner. But that is going to be real dollars that you can use to pay for your utilities or to pay for whatever expenses you've got that you just can't kind of stomach in this moment alone. So help is on the way. Give it time to kind of get through the system, and that money is on its way here for you.
Well, and it may be for somebody like Stephanie, if she's had to take a pay cut or their family's had to take a pay cut, it may be that as the employer is able to take advantage of other CARES Act stipulations, that some of that pay cut, I mean, I can't make any promises, but the hope is that those employers are going to go back to employees that either been furloughed, laid off, reduced, and restore them back so that it's less of pressure on unemployment, as I understand it, right?
Absolutely. And we'll get into that bigger kind of small business relief here in just a minute, how that relates to that. But the other thing I'd mention here too, right? Unemployment insurance has been expanded largely, higher dollar amounts. And so for folks who have lost jobs, I know it's certainly in Colorado, the unemployment insurance system is really taxed at this point. And so you've got to kind of call based on your last name on a specific day. So all of that stuff is online there. But that is another option, right? If you're completely out of work, you can receive unemployment insurance benefits. And those, you've got the state portion of that, but then you've also got an extended piece from the federal government. I think it's $600 a week. And so in addition, kind of the state feature, you can get the federal feature as well. So again, more stopgap measures to help us all get through this kind of crisis together. So
and if I understand it correctly too, that's including folks that have not historically been considered for unemployment, right? Folks that are gig economy employees like Uber drivers, folks that are self-employed, folks that even like weren't paying in to unemployment are going to be eligible to apply for it.
Absolutely. Like most nonprofits do not pay into unemployment insurance, but by and large, if you were let go from a nonprofit, you still be able to qualify for unemployment insurance. And so they're really opening up the floodgates. If we think about this CARE Act, $2.2 trillion, like that's like 10% of our national debt. Like it's an unfathomable amount of money. And so there are, this is the time for big government. For folks who are not fans of big government, this is the time for kind of these natural sort of disasters. Even though this isn't necessarily like an earthquake or a flood, this is a disaster that we're all kind of navigating together. And there's money out there from the federal government. How they get it, that's a conversation for another day. but it is out there available for us to kind of utilize as U.S. citizens.
Yeah, Elsie Powell, who does some HR work, that's her world. She said this is so important, being that in Colorado, unemployment is a little tricky right now and may take longer than anticipated for some that have lost income or reduction in income. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, obviously, you talked a little bit about kind of what are the implications for an individual? Like, what are ways that we're thinking about and kind of paring back even some of those home finance things? Like there's like whole services where you can look at the 17,000 different subscriptions that you're on and pull them off. But obviously, those probably feel like nibbles to a lot of people. And then there's also folks that are trying to figure out, okay, I'm doing okay right now. Like, what are the things that are going to be kind of most in play for me right now? And I see your note about charitable contributions. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, so this is a cool feature. This is a little bit self-serving in us saying this, right? Because we work at a church and work for a nonprofit that receives donations. But if we remember back in 2019, we all had this standard deduction get increased because of the tax law that was passed 2018-ish, something like that, maybe 2017. I don't exactly remember. But the standard deduction for when we were filing taxes increased to a level that a lot of us now, we don't itemize our taxes anymore because the standard deduction was so high. And so if you don't itemize, what happens is if you give money to a charity, because you're not itemizing, you're not getting quote unquote tax credit for that. As part of this CARES Act, they are kind of effectively allowing you to do this above the line. So you can continue to take the standard deduction, but if you make $300 in contributions to a nonprofit, like a 501c3 qualifying nonprofit, you can take that deduction from your 2020 taxes. In this case, when we filed right again in April of 2021, you can take that as an above the line deduction. And so just a great little feature for somebody who is maybe not lost their job and is able to kind of give back to nonprofits in the community that are doing really, really good things, right? Not to toot our own horns, but like, Kendall with 4 Aurora is doing some really great things, feeding 30 or 40 families and hundreds of meals every week. Like, those things are continuing to happen that we can be a part of by donating to nonprofits. The government has made that even easier for us to do and given us even more of an incentive to do that.
Oh, that's really helpful. Now, obviously, there are folks that are watching this or folks that are going to watch it that not only are employees, but have employees. Small businesses comprise a significant percentage of our economy. Talk a little bit about how the CARES Act specifically is going to affect small businesses.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the times, right, when we hear these things, we hear like, oh, the $1,200 is for me and all of that. And then we're like, oh, but then big business or businesses get all of this tax relief. But if we really think about it, over 50% of us work for small businesses in the US. And so that means, Phil and I specifically, we work for a small business. And there are probably several others on this watching this video, either live or later on, that work for a small business. And so the relief that small businesses are getting is going to trickle down very, very directly to us as individual employees of those small businesses. And so I just want to kind of preface that by saying this is a good thing, I think, for the economy as a whole, because so much of what we do and all that we are kind of is impacted by small business. And so really the big pieces within the CARES Act for small businesses, there's some kind of smaller tax credits that businesses are going to get for not reducing wages by more than 50%, or if their income was reduced by 50% or more, they're kind of going to get some of these tax credits. The big thing, as I see it, is this thing called the Payroll Protection Plan, and it's a PPP. So I think those are the 3 Ps. But really, what this incentivizes small businesses to do is to keep employees employed by the employer, instead of having to lay them off or furlough them and send them to the unemployment insurance kind of conundrum that Elsie brought up, right? There are things that are so far backed up that it's just going to take some time for that to matriculate through the system. Senators, when they passed this bill and as they were creating it, explicitly said, we want to put this in place so that the unemployment insurance program is not inundated by people getting laid off. So effectively, right, what they are doing is the government is saying, we are going to give you a loan. And in most cases, it's going to be a forgivable loan, meaning a grant, effectively, free money that a business will be able to have so that they can continue to pay people their normal rate, continue to be productive and continue to make things happen, and not and allow people, right, and employees not to be concerned that they're going to be out of work or reduced hours or reduced pay or anything like that. And so I think for a lot of us, right, as employees, that's a huge take a breath moment. But for like small business owners and folks that work at small businesses and kind of like run a small business, this should be a huge take a breath moment, because uh, the lifeline that the federal government is giving to these small businesses can help us all, right, stay in business, continue to do what we're doing, continue to stay employed, and really kind of live to fight another day here, and see our ways through this pandemic.
And really, I mean, it's so many of these things are not designed to be like a here. It feels to me like here's how to stimulate the economy. It feels like here's how to survive while we push pause on the planet for a while and hope that we can flatten the curve and give healthcare officials the chance to a fighting chance to have what they need to care for people.
For sure, right? And this isn't going to solve everything, right? I mean, this is, we say it's 2.2 trillion dollars, which is an unfathomable amount of money. I think it was like 350 billion dollars is allocated to this small business kind of side of things. That is enough to kind of get us through the next kind of 8 weeks. It's not enough to kind of be the silver bullet to kind of help us all to ride off into the sunset, right? This is going to get us through this kind of these next number of weeks, maybe a number of months, and then we'll see kind of what happens. I would not be surprised to see something like this, like a re-up of money from Congress, and at the Secretary of the Treasury asking for more money, depending upon how long this thing goes. But I think I'm encouraged, right, to know that these things happened really quickly, and the government is willing enough to step in to make sure that we are not affected by this thing that we didn't create. If we think about the 2008 kind of financial crisis, the argument can be made that a lot of banks were kind of doing some really shady things, and not handling kind of things the right way. None of that happened to us, right? All of this happened to us, and I hate being a victim. Like, that's one of our staff, or one of our family values, is like, we're not victims. We don't blame other people. But man, this thing feels like this was brought upon us by, it's this invisible enemy, right? And so the government is doing all that they can to help us all through that, knowing that, man, we didn't bring any of this on ourselves.
Well, for the individual, right? If we bounce back and we think about, the person that feels like, hey, I've got pretty significant credit card debt. I was kind of living paycheck to paycheck before. Now my paycheck feels less certain. I've still got one, but I might not. What would be some practical and individual advice you would give that person? Like, we're talking about kind of weathering the storm, big picture for the world. What would you give some practical advice to that person about how to mitigate some of that and weather the storm over the next few months?
Yeah, so I think part of this advice is almost like, if I were receiving this advice and I wasn't kind of in the spot that I wanted to be in, I would be like, well, yeah, thanks for letting me know this, like, too little too late. But I think for a lot of us to think about creating kind of those stop gaps in our own life, in our own budgets, right? Budgets a lot of the times have kind of a bad connotation, but I think budgets can really dictate our behavior, and by dictating our behavior can really get us to the point of like being free from kind of the grip of finances. And so for me, the way that looks like is I've got an emergency fund. And I started out with $1,000, and as I was able to create margin within my budget, I grew that to 6 months of my expenses. But wherever you are, get an emergency fund, because emergencies are going to happen. I know $1,000 isn't a ton of money, but that can stem the tide for a minute if your hot water heater goes out or something like that. So have that emergency fund in place. Make sure you're doing a budget. I know that, especially in times like this, it's like, man, I'm just trying to scrape and claw and keep everything in front of me that I can kind of control. But like, if you can kind of get your budget in place, it can really, really help you in life, but especially in times of turmoil like we find ourselves in today. And so yeah, there's plenty of free programs out there that are helpful. EveryDollar from Dave Ramsey's group. Mint is something that I use. It's through Intuit, the same people that create TurboTax and QuickBooks. So I feel like they're pretty reputable. But plenty of ways that you can kind of create those budgets and stick to those budgets so that you've got margin enough, like I said, to kind of weather some of those storms that are certain to come our way, whether it be a coronavirus pandemic or a hot water heater going out or something else that comes up just in life.
And I think like one of the things that I discover really every time that I do like a line by line budget review is where money's going. And there are just times where you're like, oh, I didn't remember that, or I didn't think about that, or there's a different plan option, or, the individual dollars and cents of each adjustment may not feel like they're going to move the needle that much. But by the time you get to the end of several of those things, you may realize that there are hundreds of not hundreds of thousands of or hundreds of dollars in a given month that you're going like, I can, without really any change, save this money. And if you're in a position right now where you still have a job, steady income, this is the perfect time to go try to create that margin that Anthony is talking about and to begin building the margin and that reserve so that if you need it later, it's waiting for you.
That's right. And it's a lot easier kind of outside of that storm to create that when you've got kind of a clearer head and things are a little easier for you to digest. I get it, man. If you've lost your job and you're like, man, how am I going to buy groceries? That's a different kind of mindset, and you're just kind of surviving. And man, survive. Like, do all you can do to survive. But if you're in a little bit better spot, use this time. Like, use this as almost as a wake up call to say, man, I've got to get kind of my financial house in order. And it's not rocket science, right? It's spend less than you make, right? That's really a budget. And if you really want to kind of set aside margins, spend less than you make. And so if that means cutting the subscription to Netflix for a few months to kind of build up that emergency plan or whatever that case might be, I think we can all kind of make that sacrifice for a time, knowing that it's not going to be necessarily forever, to kind of get things in order.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if you're watching this and you have specific questions, or if there are issues that you want Anthony to be able to talk about, you can just drop them right in the comments feed and we will address those here. We know that this is a big deal and it's not going to go away. Like this, it feels like this is all going to get worse before it gets better. And so we want to be honest about that. This is not just like hey, if you do these two things, everything's going to be good. Like, it feels like we're all sort of bearing down and trying to make the best decisions that we can. Thankful for some unique opportunities because of the CARES Act. Thankful for some deferments that are available, like Anthony's talked about. But we know this is messy, and especially if I think for a lot of people that were like living right on the line, any disruption can really change your reality, and significant disruption, it may feel like there's no way out. And I think that I just want to reiterate Anthony's advice to take a breath, because, we get a chance to wake up every day and, hopefully you get to go like, hey, I have a place to live and I have food to eat and I have, today what I need. Now, I do want to make sure, as you're thinking, if you have questions, feel free to submit those in there. I do want to make sure you guys know this. If you've never tuned in anything here before, haven't checked this out, we have an initiative called For Aurora. And maybe you're somebody that you're like, I lost my job weeks ago. I was in a difficult financial spot when that happened, and things have only gotten worse. I'm making really difficult decisions about who's going to eat in our home and like how we're going to just survive day to day. There are opportunities for you to get help, especially things like food supplies and basics through For Aurora. There's a couple contact information opportunities there. And if you're somebody that's doing well and you want to help, this is a great path to be able to say, hey, I'm here, let me help. We're using the phrase a lot right now. We're trying to load the barns up, like just get ready so that when there's a bigger need, we have the supplies to be able to help meet that need in our community.
Yeah. I think the final thing that I would say is that, Phil, you mentioned that things are going to get worse before they get better. And the thing that we kind of focus on is the worst part, but things are going to get better. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be next month, right? But things are going to get better. And so like, take that as encouragement. It may be a little bit bleak right now, but things will get better. I promise you that. Life will get back to quote unquote normal, whatever that looks like at some point, if we all do our part to help flatten that curve, right? But things will get better, and be encouraged by that today.
Again, my hope is that whether this has been something you've needed or there's somebody in your life that needs it, that this could just be one share away, one message away, that for their kind of practical help financially, or for the stuff that maybe a small business needs. This has been extremely helpful for us as a church. I want to say thank you to Anthony here for all the work you've done, dude, to just put us in the very best position. And I hope that for a lot more people, they're able to benefit from these helps as well. So we'll keep an eye on this chat feed. So if you have more questions and you're watching this later, feel free to drop those in there. I will drop in the link to the show notes that break down the specifics of what Anthony was talking about. And we hope this has been helpful. We are thinking about you guys. We know we're working on this. And like Anthony said, we are all going to get through it together. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Anthony, for your time.
See you guys.